Thank you very much, dear Rima. I think a lot of people in the big ACO circle are, so to say, impressed and fan of ACO women, especially maybe in Strasbourg. The more we found about Hedwig Bull and Anne-Marie Tartard, we are very impressed. Thank you very much. And now it's open time for discussion. So I give the floor to Wilbert. Yes.
Thank you, Mathieu.
We'll manage this time. And,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask the panelists of today to open their cameras as well. So Thomas and Paul and Philippe and Rima. Yes, thank you. There haven't been any questions coming in through the chat. There have been some remarks about archives, but I would like to encourage everyone, all the people who are attending, to give your remarks or your questions to the panelists. So feel free to do that. In the meantime, I will kick off with a question, and I think this question could best be answered by either Thomas or Philippe. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work in Jazeera? I think this work is not very well known to many of us, and there were things happening there that were outside the French mandate, as we understand it, or maybe it was a colonizing activity, as Philippe said. So what exactly was happening there? The people were new there, ACO was new to it, so who could tell us a little bit more about that? Thomas, you have to open your microphone, please.
Sorry, I have there is a text about this in the book of Beirut, but really now I have to read it again to be able to answer this question. Maybe Philippe had better memory. He's younger than me, than I am. So
then over to you, Philippe.
Okay, well, I will try to venture an answer, but I'm a bit shy, especially about this part of ACO's work at the time. As far as I understand, there was kind of a millefeuille of occasions or of possibilities for work. And what is surprising for me is that whereas Jazeera was indeed reserved, especially through appropriations by the, channeled by the colonial state, appropriations towards reserving land, establishing people, etc., for refugees, in especially the famous Durafour fund in the Khabour Valley. The ACO shifted to other communities that had been missionized before. So, well, that's something that you see all through the interwar period. There had been a shake-up of the missions across the Middle East due to first the German missions being expelled, second due to huge budget issues. So it was like one mission after another, and especially for Protestant mission, the issue was who would take over. And so instead of focusing on Assyrians and Armenians alone, which they work with in the Khabour Valley, mind you, they found themselves doing kind of an alternative work with first local Arab Protestants. So here the goal was to strengthen an existing community, especially by having spiritual help, if not the means to send a permanent pastor, a permanent minister, And vis-a-vis the Kurds, it's all very blurry to me, except that it dovetailed with the intention to missionize, to do mission towards the Muslims, which Beirut never gave up on. And at the same time, he probably also felt that this was kind of an ignored area of Syria. There was a problem in the making there, that this whole Kurdish population was essentially ignored by both the French colonial state and the Syrian state in the making. That's how I see it through the little that I have read about this. But, well, let's say I need to go into the archives more to test my hypothesis.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you. That clarifies things a little bit more. Another point that I think we could pose to the panelists is the work of the ACO in relation to education. Maybe Reverend Paul can also say a little bit more about that. I think Aleppo and Jazeera were both centers where the ACO worked on education, but also beyond that. So was that restricted to the mandate period, or did that continue? Who could say a little bit more about the impact of the ACO on education?
If I may do something very small, I haven't researched that point. However, one of the points that I raised, and I think with Philippe and Thomas, I think we heard, it is the transition from one mission to the other, one station to the other, one foundation to the other. In our readings, we see that most people didn't realize who was whose missionary. They realized where they were working, with whom they were working. Just to give one example, a number of people of Hilfsbund, Philippe gave the socio-political, of course, and somewhat economic reason, but some of the missionaries who were with Hilfsbund were eventually ACO people in Aleppo or elsewhere. So that's within the school systems. For example, they would immediately shift into teaching. In Aleppo, it was less fathering and mothering than it was teaching and organizing. At least I know that in the transition, in the development of missions in Aleppo, lots of work shifted to education, whereas in Turkey, it was way, way, way more within the school systems. That's at least what I know. And I don't know if you were going to use it. You sent me, Wilbert, 2 days ago, a WhatsApp message. I don't know if that's part of your presentation. It's not.
No, it's not. Please present it. Yeah.
So I'll give the following example, which is very, very interesting for me. So my grandfather, Hovannes, father's father, who was a Hilfsbund missionary, teacher responsible for an orphanage and a school in Marash, the Beit Shalom orphanage, for many years, and our other family members. When they came to Aleppo, they didn't, after the Marash massacres of 1920, they stayed 2 more years in the Beit Shalom mission in Marash, 2 more years. 1922, when they came to Aleppo, and he was the first principal of the school they founded, the Bethel school. They kept the same name of the Hilfsbund some school in Marash. When Reverend Wilbert sent me a poster or a report of ACO, my grandfather Hovannes is considered an ACO missionary from the first year, 1923. So it's a fascinating move from one foundation to the other, because school was simpler, I think, in places like Aleppo. There were dozens of schools being founded. That's one. Thankfully, Dr. Wilma mentioned another person I remember from my childhood at our home, Miss Ulmer and Miss Zaruhi Pashajikyan. She was our neighbor, actually, Zaruhi and Miss Ulmer. And I knew them from the school systems in Normarash and the other areas where my father was involved. So it's, I think the school system helped them integrate, it was clearer than in the earlier years of the genocide or pre-genocide. So, I mean, mine is more autobiographical than it is research that I'm sharing with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Paul. There's a question for Rima by Rutger Maurits. Could Rima tell something more about Arab and Armenian women? And this builds on what Reverend Paul was just saying, serving their churches in collaboration with ACO foreign missionaries.
Yeah, I think I need to sit in the archives maybe for a longer period to collect all this and make this distinction, because it was a bit difficult for me throughout my readings to figure out which ones of these collaborators, because they call them collaborators, were actually paid by ACO and therefore officially also considered missionaries, and which ones were volunteers who were from their churches or maybe linked to other mission organizations who are working with them. I came across a number of names like Pasha Jukian. I can't pronounce all these letters together, but Saruhi. Of course, it looked very clearly that she is an ACO missionary. We have from Nance's book, she explains the whole process about Amal Ishaq and how she put a request for the Morphland sending and told them, I need somebody to help me. I have this woman in mind. Would you please consider hiring her? And they had some conditions. The conditions were that she gets some official training. So she got some Bible training by nuns herself. So she sat down with her and gave her some training. And then she was hired by ACO. I also know of people like Samira Da'bous, who probably was hired in Sarbin. I'm getting message also from Reverend Salam Hanna, who is saying that his aunt Zahra Hanna was also in Sarbin studying and then working together with Hartman. I think there should be more work done to collect all these names, because I am pretty sure we have many names. I can also share a little picture here. Is it visible? I don't know if yes. I think it's visible, of one random picture that I have, for example, where it says Conférence de nos collaborateurs à Shtura. And it has Pasha Jikian, it has Khachadurian, this is not it's a man, but it has names. So you every now and then we come across these pictures of people with their names and it says collaborateur. Sometimes it only says 4 institutrices, without any names. 4 teachers in the school, in Hasake, for example, 4 institutrices, but we have no idea what their names are and what their position is. So yes, I would really like to research that more.
Thank you, Rima. So there was no further question coming in on the chat. So I think you're curious to see the results of the poll that we took during the break. So let me bring those up for you. I can share the results here. The first question was, how many missionaries and fraternal workers did ACO employ in its 100-year history? And there were 4 options there. The majority of you thought about 50, but as we've been researching, with this team of panelists and the people who are going to present tomorrow, we have found out that it must go up to at least 75 or approximately 75, and that is more than we expected. Sometimes in the official records or in the histories, the count goes to 30 or 40, but if you look closely, you see that there were more people there, including those who were sent, for example, from Aleppo to Jazeera, or from Syria to Iran. And so there were more missionaries there than we thought. So the answer is 75. Then the second question was, in which countries did the ACO have projects or post workers? Okay, this, as you can expect, the answer is all of the above, actually. Of course, Lebanon, Syria. Many of you knew about Iran and also about the ACO's involvement in Egypt. But there were smaller initiatives and smaller projects in these other countries. And so the ACO has been involved in these countries at least, and perhaps in more countries. So there's time for one last question before we stop for today. And this question comes from California, Hendrik Shanzarian. When did the cooperation of the Swiss, Dutch, and French start and develop to the way it is now? Can I ask one of the panelists to shed light on this? So what about the cooperation between the Swiss, the Dutch, and the French? When did it start and how did it develop into what it is today? Of course, the second part of the question is topic of some of the presentations tomorrow, but maybe the current panelists can shed a little bit of light on the beginning of this cooperation.
I think I may be able to give a bit of an answer there. So as for the Dutch, I'm on more certain ground than the Swiss. The Dutch committee was created around 1923, 1924. And at the time, basically, Beirut helped organize tours by a number of Armenian Protestant figures in the Netherlands, trying to raise money, basically. That was the main goal. And actually, he complains in the beginning that he's having more problems raising money there. Quickly a number of figures arise, the most visible of which, I guess, is, sorry for my awful Dutch, Cato de Witt, who basically becomes his main interlocutor right away. And efficiently enough to, as I said, become the main provider of fund before World War II. After World War II, the share in the Dutch budget apparently became lower, but for Switzerland, on the one hand, there were Swiss ACO agent right away, which raised the question of organizing a committee there. I don't know, and I will make it a point to research the point when exactly the Swiss committee was established. What I know from the archives is that it kind of crystallized during the 1930s. There's a lot more of archives for that period.
Thank you, Philippe. I hope that answers the questions sufficiently. I can see that some people have raised their hand and would like to put in a remark. So I can see that I have an option to allow people to talk. So here we go. This is
André Joly wanted to talk, I think, about this issue.
André Joly. Okay, so let's go over to André then. I think, André, do you have your camera and your microphone open? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I believe so. No, I don't want to be too long, but just want to add a few details about what Philippe said right away. We have two answers, one institutional and one just of people getting involved in supporting the Armenians right after the genocide. And mainly the presence of pastors, especially in the German and the French-speaking part of Switzerland, were more or less involved after the genocide of 1917. So we saw a lot of refugees, Armenian refugees, coming to Switzerland in 1922, 1923, 1925. And then that started a kind of conscious awareness within the churches about what was going on in Armenia and in Turkey as well. But let's say I don't know exactly the date where ACO committee was created, but what I can say that in 1963, our missionary department gathered all those little missions, and ACO was a mission within all the 6 missions who created the DM, Département Missionnaire, missionary department at that time. That's it.
Thank you, André. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to allow somebody to talk, which is Mr. Khanjan from the MAAA. I think he's talking from the United States. Mr. Khanjan, please, the floor is yours.
Hello.
Hello. You raised your hand, so I thought you wanted to make a remark.
Oh no, but no, I didn't. But I can make a comment. Thank you for sharing this seminar worldwide. It's definitely a very interesting and important organization to talk about deeply. What I would say is that my personal experience from Aleppo while raising up ourselves in Aleppo when we were children and young students, I would say that the name itself of Action Chrétienne Orient is embedded in every Armenian's mind, even if they have not had any relationship with ACO or have not received any of the benefits, but the fact that it was a center for the youth, and certainly it was a hub for goodness, a reflection of God's love. I guess, as I said, at every Armenian from that generation, from my generation, I would say, is knows and is aware of this organization and the blessings that it has had on Aleppo itself. You are certainly expanding, and it's a good discussion to listen to as to where and how those reflections have taken place in the Near East. The name itself, of course, talks about it, but I can vouch about Aleppo, and I would say within the Armenian community, ACO in itself was an independent church. It had its own youth, it had its own youth activities, it had its own basketball team. And you spoke about Jazeera a little while ago. I would say that most of the kids who had come from Jazeera to Aleppo were at ACO. Somehow they took home for them in youth activities was ACO rather than the other Armenian evangelical churches. So that's what I'd like to share with you this morning. I don't know how helpful it is, but it's my reflection of what I remember and what I know from my childhood days and age in Aleppo itself. I think ACO has done a tremendously important mission work within Armenia and Armenians, and the fact that we today are academically discussing this subject is definitely partially owed to ACO because of the level of knowledge and education that we've got, part of which has been a reality because of ACO.
Thank you, Mr. Khanjan. Thank you for these comments. I think the ACO basketball team is a very nice high note to finish on today, actually. We promised that we would end our first day of the conference at 6:30 Lebanon time, and I'm going to keep that promise. I know that some of you have raised their hands, but unfortunately we cannot answer their questions or allow them to speak. But please do put your questions in an email or put them tomorrow in the chat, and maybe tomorrow we can come back to those questions or remarks. I would like to thank again all the speakers of today, and over to you, Mathieu.
Well, thank you, Wilbert, and see you tomorrow, I would say. I don't know how to finish today, but I think it's very exciting and interesting to address all this issue and to deepen our knowledge of our own institution. I'm learning every day, and here in Strasbourg, with all the archives and the work being done by some scholars like Philippe Bourmeau coming, and I mean it's pushing us to move forward on this historical issue and getting more insights and so on. So we are in a mood now with the French committee, and I think in other places also to go deeper in different questions and to work on this very rich history. Yes, so thank you for all the contributors today, and I'm eager to hear what's going, what will be shared tomorrow. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a nice evening, everyone, and see you tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you.